So welcome everyone to the Prime Student Dialogue discussion. So today we will be discussing the question, can students lead the sustainability transformation of business schools? So we will be contextualizing this question and this discussion to the positive impact rating, which is in a few simple words, is a new by students and for students rating. So the rating, in fact, reaches out to students to assess their own business school on how they perceive the schools in creating a positive impact on and for the world. So we will try to understand how peer can help be a change maker, but also how students can collaborate with their schools to energize, educate, and engage for societal and sustainable impact. So I'm the student engagement coordinator for their peer. Today, to help us understand the role of students in this transformation and how the peer can support this, we have four great speakers. We have Sophie Charrois, president of Oikos International, a global community of students that act for change in management and economics education. We have Sam Charner, who is an associate director at Net Impact, which with their chapters set up all over the world, change and act on change in management and economics education. And as for our student representatives, we have Adriana Gutierrez, peer student coordinator at the Central American Institute of Business Administration, so INCAE in Costa Rica. Adriana is part of the school sustainability club. She has worked in different initiatives, and including the peer, of course. We have Pawan Jose, peer student coordinator for XLRI, Xavier School of Management in India. He was part of the peer team this year. He's also a member of Sigma Oikos, which is the association that works on campus towards social welfare and sustainability. So just to get the discussion started, I'd like to mention that Positive Impact Rating this year registered a record number of responses. This year we collected over 8,000 responses, which I believe shows the strong desire and wish for students to take part in the development of responsible management education. So yes, again, the peer clearly, I think, showcases the strong student engagement that's happening all over the globe. So for this reason, I would like to ask Sophie and Sam, who are part of the two student-led networks that are set up in different business schools all over the world. First question would be, what is the level of and how does student engagement look like in the business schools that your organization is present in? And as a follow-up question also, how does your student-led organization contribute to making the schools the best for the world? So Sophie, perhaps you would like to go first.
Thank you so much, Juliana, and it's a real pleasure to be here with you all. And also, I really love the mixture of the panel, actually, with having Sam here, who also represents an international network, and Adriana and Pawan, who really can talk about what is happening on the ground. I don't know if everyone in the audience knows, but Oikos is a global network. We have local student groups represented in over 50 universities and business schools. And I think the question is rather hard to answer for me, because the organization, the network, has been growing quite organically over the past 30 years, actually. And every campus is different. Every group has a different character, right? And adapts to the local context, which we believe is very, very important for really bringing about change we want to see. And so over the year, it has really been growing into something interdisciplinary and intercultural, a real platform to explore sustainability and make it less abstract on the local level. So what I can say is that it really starts in the small things, right? It starts in projects like, okay, bringing recyclable coffee cups to your campus. But it's actually in our network, what we see growing over the past years is really that projects like curriculum change, like really taking ownership of your own education, are something that are changes or like approaches that pick up in pace and also in scale as well. Yeah. Sam, what is your experience?
Sure, I'm happy to learn more. And also thank you again for having me. It's really great to be able to join this event today. So Net Impact has about 400 chapters around the world. Our chapters cover undergraduate, graduate, and professionals in about 40 countries. And so just for a little bit of context, like at our headquarters office, which is where I work, we focus on providing opportunities and resources for those chapters. And then they take those and apply them to their local context. So like Sophie was saying, there's so much variety when you have that many people in that many places and that many contexts, that what that looks like really does vary. You know, what programming of and events are those chapters are doing is different. Some they're doing panels, some they're doing workshops, some they're focusing on food insecurity, some they're focusing on climate change, some they're focusing on impact investing. There are a lot of those behavior change campaigns. We've seen the same thing. I think it's a real trend in what students are really looking for. You know, a couple of things that like I was part of one of our chapters before I joined our office, and we worked on curriculum change at my graduate school. We were working on increasing the number of cases in our curriculum that were focused on social impact. And that's something that I hear about from our chapters all the time as well. There's also like that individual experience thing that behavior change can really help with too. We did a project about a year ago focused on increasing the amount of plant-based foods available on campuses. And so things like that can have a really big impact, and they're really great. And like those are all ways that like different chapters can work in their business schools toward the common goal that we have of building a more just and sustainable world, which is our mission. And through that, they really are making their schools the best for the world, because they are making those small, medium, and large changes in behavior and knowledge to really make a difference. And one of the things that I really appreciate about PIR here is that it adds some additional context. You know, there's both quantitative and qualitative information, and it also really does reflect the diversity of institutions that Sophie and I both are talking about. But like, there are different ways that schools approach impact, and PIR really reflects that, while also at the same time challenging every school to better themselves as part of the process. And I think that's really valuable.
Thank you, Sam and Sophie. So yeah, we heard from you this sort of more global perspective, and you mentioned the local context. And in fact, we have here two student representatives, so we can hear their voice. And as I mentioned in the introduction, in fact, both Adriana and Pawan led this year their peer survey in their schools, which participated actually in both editions of the peer 2020 and 2021. So I'd like to ask them, how do you assess your school's engagement to achieve a positive impact in the world? And I'd invite Pawan to go first.
Thank you, Juliana. Thank you everyone for being here. It's a real privilege to be representing my school at this venue. And so yes, as Sophie and Sam so rightly put it, any discussion like this does not make any sense without bringing the context into the picture. So our business school, XLRI, is situated in the state of Jharkhand in India. And our state is known for its number of tribal population, the community of the population residing in rural areas who are from indigenous tribes. It's a significant number. And so we have, in a sense, a social responsibility of sort of serving them, you could say. And so how we would assess impact would be how much of this population are we empowering through our programs? How many people from, say, rural areas are being given training or some sort of development aids through our institution? I think that's something that we can put into metrics, and that's what we do. As for our city, we are in the city of Jamshedpur, which is the biggest city in the state. But still, we have a lot of high schools, a lot of smaller educational institutions that could sort of derive benefits from our system of education. And so that's also how we would measure impact, as to how many students from high schools around the city are being influenced or are being sort of directed in the right way because of the experience our faculty and our students can provide. So that's there. And also outside the institution, we have a rich alumni base. So what are the alumni doing now? How many of them are serving the social sector, social enterprises? That's very relevant. And at the same time, how are the faculties working outside their academic responsibilities? So these factors these are the ones that we feel are the key factors in sort of measuring or assessing social impact, so to speak.
Thank you, Pawan. Adriana.
Thank you, Juliana. Thank you for having me. And it's like Pawan, I share that it's a great honor to be representing our students at INCAE. And I think something that relevant is the interesting fact that INCAE has a similar background. INCAE, since its foundation, it has been involved in mentoring public and private sector institutions in the Latin American region, with two of the main challenges, which always have been instability and inequality. And so in that sense, these research hubs have begun to be created at INCAE a long time ago, with geared towards branches of sustainable development, including inclusive entrepreneurship, even women in leadership. And so as students, you can end up being a researcher in one of those hubs, or many students that leave and end up either working or owning businesses that later on are researched to be applied in the case methods within the classroom. And so I think what INCAE is doing is that they're fostering this positive impact through like a knowledge loop. I would like to see it that way, of you know, developing leaders, conscious leaders that either become researchers or are being researched to apply their knowledge within the classroom. So I think that's a very good thing to highlight of what the positive impact of INCAE has been in our region.
Thank you both. And in fact, I mean, the peer Sam mentioned, of course, is a quantitative assessment, but it's also a qualitative assessment. So that's what the peer collects, so opinions of students through the open questions. So this is a part of the tool that actually the schools themselves value greatly, because it's the part where the school can actually take feedback and act on change. So a lot of schools from the last edition have already taken action on the feedback. And just as well, in case you want to refer to this material, you can go on the peer website and you'll find case studies and references. But just to, yes, be in line with this principle, again, I would like to ask Adriana and Pawan and sort of like, what could the school do better? So the question is, what could your schools do more and better to create positive impact through their teaching and developing responsible leaders? Adriana, you would like to go first?
Yes. Well, I think it in line with what the peer evokes, I would like to touch the point first of the curriculum change. I think with the peer results, we have realized that our curriculum has more of an issue with perception than sustainability. We in our programs, we have a whole sustainability module, and part of what we have heard from students is that they would like to see explicitly sustainability integrated in all of our courses, because sustainability in the end is not a topic that can stand on its own. It's just part of doing good business. And so that leads to the second point that we could improve is opening dialogue with our faculty, with our administration and students, in which the peer is aligned to those goals of improving our curriculum. And actually, thankfully, we already have the support of our faculty to have this open dialogue in which we would present the peer results to them and together create this strategy to improve our curriculum and to create a larger impact in our classrooms. And then it's another thing that we would like to address moving forward with our peer results is the continuous efforts when we transition from one generation of students to another, and where the peer is involved in this is that it's an excellent evaluation metric to create strategies and objectives, and that would be our legacy to the future generations so that they can work on that and nothing is stopped. No effort is stopped when we move from one generation of students to another. And then lastly, the hands-on application in a business program is extremely valuable. And in conversations with our dean, we have actually come up with this element of creating more opportunities for either work hour studies or consulting projects that are more involved and focused on social and environmental issues. That's on our part.
Thank you, Adriana. What about you, Pawan? What would you like your school to do better?
Yeah, so I resonate with what Adriana said about curriculum change, which is a very powerful way of sort of bringing in change, because that's a real concrete way of bringing things to sort of fruition, or so to say, to move forward. And it's interesting to note that the requirements from curriculum change are slightly different on our end than, say, Adriana's end. As Adriana said, her college needed some courses on sustainability. For us, we feel it's more on something related to the social sector. To be more specific, social entrepreneurship. We do have one course, but we feel perhaps having more venues of engaging students is pivoted or would be nice. For instance, we have a program of village excursion, which is given to the first year students. And that was quite an offbeat idea when it first came, but it has been quite popular. And that sort of gives students a picture of what exactly exists in the rural sector and the social sector and stuff like that. Now, things like that can be implemented in the way that we can have academic incentives for, say, social, for projects in the social sector or something like that. And yes, now one more thing is students can be encouraged to have projects with social enterprises. Now we have social and sustainability clubs in our campus who work with social enterprises and nonprofits to ensure that students get hands-on experience with work in that sector. And that usually works, say a nonprofit comes to our college and they give us that we have certain projects, certain areas that require, say, a few weeks to complete. And it would be nice if your management know-how could be used here. So some students apply for it and students sort of work with these nonprofits, getting the experience. Now, once students have an experience of the field, once students get a taste of what work here feels like, people obviously are going to be stirred and they'll want to know more about it. And this is what is going to push for the curriculum change. So it's a two-step process where you both encourage students to work with social sector organizations, and that in the end trickles down to the curriculum change part. And this can be done this can be done by sort of incentivizing this fact that, if you are sort of taking up a project of a nonprofit, you can have extra credits, you can have something that would sort of encourage students. So that is something that we as a college can do.
Thank you both. I think this discussion really showcases how much students are willing to take part in the change, in the transformation. I think even personally, my involvement in peer has showcased that. So I guess that leads in the next question, so which is for Sam and Sophie. Considering that's the context, what can you and we from the peer do to support and increase this student engagement? Sam,
you want me to kick it off? Sure. Yeah, so I think like the scale is important. When we're talking about so many different institutions, there are a lot of differences there. Social impact might be already integrated into the curriculum or into the culture, or in some other universities, it's more of like a side project, for lack of a better word. And the way that students are involved looks different. Sometimes they have an opportunity to help build the curriculum. Sometimes there's like a wall between the curriculum and students and really everything in between. And one of the great things about peer is that it sort of reflects that. It provides opportunities that are going to work for lots of different colleges and universities, and therefore lots of different chapters that we work with. And it can sort of reflect those different contexts. I think the other nice thing is that like by involving students directly, you can get a sense of what's like actually happening at the schools, and the sort of qualitative information that it goes along with the numbers helps tell the story and provide some context. Like what am I trying to say? Like the people who are like looking at business schools, so sort of like the end user of this kind of rating, really want to get a sense of what it's going to be like there and what they're going to get out of that. They want to sort of like quote unquote see what that experience is like and what social impact looks like at that institution. And peer helps get that. It's between the qualitative and the quantitative sections or areas. You really can get a sense of like what it's like at that school, whether that is the clubs, the curriculum, the student community, the faculty and administration, all of that, you sort of get that information. And sort of going back to the sort of question of like, how do we increase that? So like, one is recognizing that, which is great. The other thing is, constantly adjusting our offerings to meet the needs of our community. This is something that we talk about all the time, and that especially in the last year and a half, in the context of COVID, we continue to talk about. And now, as an organization that's based in the United States, we are in the United States in a lucky position, and also working with people in 40 other countries. And so I imagine that complication will continue going forward. And all of that as a means to say that like the ways to increase that engagement are to work with students, and in some cases administration, and sort of meet them where they are, reflecting what that context is and how it's changing too. And I think like in the end, like in our chapters that are student run, we focus on students, and that's really important. In the end, they have agency. They can make a difference at their schools, and they can push for change no matter what the school is. And one of the great things is like we as an international organization like Orcos with Pierre, like need to let them know that we're here to help, and that we can give them tools and resources to make that change happen at their institution, and that change is possible and does happen, and sort of inspire them in that way too. And I think, that sort of inspiration of what is possible, coupled with the tools and resources to really make things happen, is like that what I would say is like the key combo of increasing engagement in peer and building those schools to be the best for the world. And I'm sure Sophie has helpful things to add to this too.
Yeah, totally. I resonate a lot with all you've shared. And what we see at Oikos International is also that what we have to offer to the students is really helping them to develop competencies and capacities which they do not get in the schools at the moment, and which they get bolder and bolder to ask for actually through tools like the peer. And maybe beyond this question of scale, when we talk about student engagement, right? For me, it's actually a question of quality as well. And the peer can help to build bridges actually between different players in a university or a business school. So what we are seeing really is that it's not the students and the school, but it's actually only when we get together at one table that we can move something forward. And the peer, through showing these perspectives, it actually gives a whole new platform. It gives a new platform. It's opening doors for different human beings to come together, I would say. And beyond that, maybe also what I want to connect to is your point of story, Sam, actually, where the peer is writing stories about, or like is offering stories about the experience of students. And depending on how it is presented, it is actually a tool that gives both students and faculty a choice. It kind of gives you the opportunity to choose which route you are taking, gives you insights you wouldn't have otherwise. And for me, it's also a sign of where the school is standing and where the school wants to go in the future, no matter which ranking or like which number of points they are having. But this sign of transparency and honestly being willing to work together with everyone who is involved on the ground is something really powerful. And that is where we see that it's not student engagement, but it's just the engagement of the whole business school ecosystem, let's say. Yeah.
Thanks, Sophie. Reminds us as well why the peer is a rating and not a ranking. So yes, thank you for all your valuable and powerful interventions. And the last question is sort of a let's dare to dream question. So if we had to imagine an ideal world, the question is, what does successful collaboration between schools and students look like? And in this vision, what would the role for the peer be? I'll leave it up to anyone that wants to pick it up first.
I can go first, if that's okay. So for me, I think three aspects that should be highlighted in a collaboration for it to be successful are transparency. I think collaboration has to be inclusive and continuous. And so how the peer enters these 3 points, it actually, for transparency, the peer is published. The university will probably publish it in their socials and in their platform. And so that creates accountability for them to actually be doing the efforts in order to align with what their students need. As the second point, which is inclusiveness, as we know, the peer is a rating. It's conducted by students, and so this allows for students to integrate in the process of decision making for their own education in their school. And lastly, continuity, because it gives you a tool to strive for continuous improvement in the next years. In our case, we would like to become, and I would like to see Incai become a pioneering school in the rating, and so that allows us to have metrics and sort of align with what to follow to get there.
That's a really nice way of putting it, Adriana. So the way I see it, I mean, if you were to ask me what the picture of an ideal situation would look like, would be when the entire focus is on the process of learning and not on the administrative backend stuff of what's happening. I mean, I think that should be left to the management when it matters, but students should be focused on the process of learning. And for instance, you don't want to be in a classroom where only the professor is interested in what's being taught and the students are wondering, why am I learning this? So to reach that place, obviously there has to be some sort of an open dialogue. And as Sophie so rightly put it, the peer actually encourages that, because all of the sections and all of the questions indicate to a place of unity where you have to unite together both the students and its management. And until unless you don't do that, there's no way you can achieve what you want to achieve. So I feel in that way, the peer is a very novel form of rating, quite different from what the conventional ratings require us to seek. So yes, that's something that we aspire for.
I think that's super beautiful, Pawan. And for me, it is just also showing again that just the words we are choosing at the moment are relevant, and we can learn a lot by just looking at the structure of sentences we use, you know, the concept of learning versus the system, or like school versus the people in the school. I just remember the question, Juliana, was the collaboration between schools and students. And for me, this is also a question of daring. Let's face that we're all human beings and that we're all in this together. And for me, true and successful collaboration starts when we can create the spaces that can hold the different perspectives actually we bring to the table. And it needs skill for that. It needs practice, humility, and maybe good starting points where we have perspectives shown in ways we didn't see them before. So yeah, I think this is something where I would hand it over to Sam and see what you're dreaming of.
Yeah, I think there's like a few things in here around this collaboration, and something that Sophie said made me think a lot about that word. And now this is like, I'm continuing to ponder this. And like, when we set up something as like schools and students, it implies that the students aren't part of the school, but they are. They're the reason they're there. They're at the school. They're the reason the school exists. They're the like primary people in the school at that moment. And so I'm not sure how helpful that is, but like that's like really making me think about like how we talk about this and how we talk about building relationships between people and different groups of people inside institutions. And that it may be part of collaboration too, is like thinking about how clearly we're able to articulate things and how we can sort of help use more transparent language and language that is more inclusive of everybody. So I really like that point that Sophie said. The other things that are coming to mind are, and like maybe this is what we actually are saying, and it's me pulling it out in a different direction, is like it's about communication. There needs to be lots of kinds of communication between students and faculty, administration and alumni and supporters and friends and all of the other people who are stakeholders in an academic institution. And that can be everything from like, let's talk about the mission of our institution to like, let's talk about the content of our curriculum. And like all of those things are important. You know, we see that our most successful chapters are those that have really strong relationships between students and faculty and administration. It would be interesting to like, that sort of is covered directly in peer, but it's a little bit more indirect. But my guess would be, it would be really hard to get a high rating in peer without having a really close and strong relationship between those different groups. I think another important thing is listening. I think that's something that like I was just trying to do with Sophie. But you know, in academic institutions, that's extra important too. Different people say things in different ways, and different people hear things in different ways, and just being open and active and listening. And I think the other thing that's important, you know, both in my organization's work, but also in what peer is working on, is like putting a stake in the ground. You know, whether that is great, our school is going to integrate sustainability directly into our curriculum and the cases we use in our curriculum. Whether that is we're going to build a academic center focused on social impact at our institution. It's going to look different from different places, but all of those are ways of putting a stake in the ground and really saying like, we're here, you know, us as students and administrators and faculty, we're going to sort of work together to make this change happen. And I think like that's the way that it's going to be successful. And that's something that like, you know, we as an EdImpact encourage to happen. And it's something that like peer, both in its like, in the fact that it exists, step one, but also in the process of schools and all the stakeholders who've been going through that, really encourages that to happen. And so I think that would be how I would answer.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, everyone, for the contribution. So perhaps I'll ask a last question. So I was thinking, if there was one message that means a lot to you, that you would like to share, one, if you have to pick one and you would like to share today with the audience, do you have one? What would that be? And again, open to anyone that wants to jump in. It's a difficult one. Sophie, I see you thinking.
Well, I think I could go first. Because I'm from India, a Gandhiji's quote is something that immediately strikes my mind in this context. And it's that there's enough for every man's need, every person's need, gender neutral, but not for every person's greed. And I think if we can instill this value in each student or in each stakeholder of our school, I think we are naturally going to take the right decisions, and the decisions that are going to propel us towards sustainability, not just with the people, I mean, not just with say the environment, but also with the people and also with the planet. So that's something I think we should sort of try to instill in all our lives if possible.
Thank you, Pawan. Anyone else inspired to share a message?
Yeah. What is alive in me now is just a massive gratitude and pride to be here and to work with people like you and to see what is happening on the ground. it moves my heart, and it makes me really faithful. And I know that in the audience right now, we also have a lot of faculty who want to reach out their hands as well. And I would just taking the voice of the students, even if I am just one person at this point, but I would say we are very willing to take that hand. So let's dance together.
Thank you, Sophie.
One of the things that I'm thinking of is like how impactful small changes can be. You know, a college or university deciding to, you know, decarbonize their endowment is a really big thing. But in the end, it starts with one person who talks to another person who talks to another person who they meet together and have a bunch of amazing whatever. You know, our Net Impact's logo is sort of ripples that intersect with each other. That's what it looks like. And that's often the way that I think about impact, is like you're often dropping one little pebble, but it's having a big ripple outward. You know, think about changing one case study in the curriculum of an academic course. You know, that's going to start with a couple people. It's relatively small, may seem like a small thing, but then you start thinking of the hundreds of students who are going to be exposed to that case, and all of the people who they're going to work with in their future employers, to all of the colleagues that they're going to have, to their bosses, to the people, their friends that they have. And that sort of continues to cascade over time, both as, you know, more people are exposed to that curriculum, but then there's more people going out and talking to more people and impacting more people. And that ripple is really powerful. And I think is a really nice way of saying, like, we can make change starting in small ways. And we should do that, because it's gonna ripple out and in the end have the big impact that we really want to have.
For me, I think the message I get from today's conversation and from experience in general is, despite all cultural differences and maybe background differences, we can see how aligned we are with our priorities in creating a positive impact. And even though, for example, for Pawan and I, we're studying, yes, we're striving for that A and that good grade, but in the end, students also want to leave a positive legacy in the world and in their businesses and whatnot. And it this means or tools to give us a voice and collaborate with people that have years of experiences like our faculty. I think it's something that we have to take advantage of right now as we study and later on as well.
Thank you. That's a beautiful vision to finish off with, and a lot of powerful messages. Thank you so much. Yeah, so thanks for being here today, for having joined also at such early or late hours of the day, depending where you're calling from. And yes, thanks. And I found the interventions and all the discussions we had very inspiring. So we can say that we've answered the question. So student can and should lead then a sustainability transformation of business schools, and the positive impact rating can serve as a tool for achieving that change. So just before we close off, I would like to share my screen just to share some details with the audience. It is just my email address. So we'll soon be taking in registrations for the new round. So for this edition. So if you're interested, of course, check out the website. Otherwise, just feel free to drop an email and we will be really happy to share further information with you. You have it all there. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And yes, thank you everyone again. And have a good rest of the day.